proceeds from the sale of the Putnam County Humane Society property would go back to the bond. They don't have to go back right away. I mean, essentially, we're facing a fiscal crisis, and if we hold on to those funds for a little while, we can pay them back at a future date. That is routine with respect to special districts and other matters in town government, moving funds from one budget line to another budget line. I contemplated in this instance, as you noted.
I'd like to go back to the comments you made regarding our legal services, the town council. It came up in an audit report. It's a question, it's an issue, and certainly we as a town board will deal with it and make modifications and adjustments as necessary. Our town attorney gets $125 an hour for extra services. If you've had any dealings with lawyers, you know that's rock bottom cheap. I can tell you our legal services, because I investigated this, are half of what the town of Carmel is. Half. So when you look at one person doing all the work, as opposed to town of Carmel, which has paralegals and several attorneys, the focus becomes clearer that we really have a pretty good arrangement for dollars cost versus services on that particular issue. But certainly we're going to look at it, and we're going to make the necessary adjustments that the auditor talks about. I would just add, the town attorneys had a lot of resolutions and a lot of activities to do to run interference for the town, because going back a year ago, the supervisor encouraged a vendor to sue the town. And our town attorney had to get involved in that and do legal briefs to defend the town. So that's the kind of thing we get into because of some activities of some of us, the supervisors' activities up here. In the 1980 campaign, then the senior Bush, George Bush, was a congressman, made the comment, voodoo economics. I don't know where you get the number 46% budget increase. That is a voodoo number. We're looking at a single-digit increase. The question is where, okay? We're doing an analysis of the budget, a realistic analysis, and 46% is not anywhere this side of the moon, okay? The last thing I want to say is this whole budget crisis, as it has been looming, is certainly an issue, and we hear about it in September that it's really pretty bad. We have a shortfall. And I call your attention to the fact that the supervisor is the budget officer. We should have been notified in March and April and June as to what the devil is going on. We're part-timers here. It's his responsibility as the budget officer, but that will change as well.
I just wanted to...
Roger. I'd like to speak to Roger's points, pardon me. With respect to the legal issue, the comptroller documented $117,000 in payments, which raised a question in the comptroller's office, their minds, regarding the propriety of those payments, possible overpayments, and they referred that matter to the New York State and local retirement system, the New York State Pension Fund, for further review. With respect to the 46% in the tax hike, that is a real number. That is a town accountant's number. And I did advise everyone in June, if you recollect, when the comptroller was here, that the unexpended fund balance, pardon me, that the comptroller and I and others had warned that the unexpended fund balance was in peril and being degraded at a rate which could not be sustained. Notwithstanding that, as Councilman Yee noted, a lot of money flew out the door flew out the door on an anti-competitive basis. And I got to tell you, that makes me kind of, I'm a happy warrior, but that makes me kind of angry. So there it is. I voted against that budget, Roger, that you handed off to me to execute. I've done. I have implemented it. I have not agreed with all of its particulars, and there it is. And going forward, we've got to incept public competition with respect to the 1.8 million tax dollars that the comptroller noted were flowing out of Town Hall on a non-competitive basis. The gravy train has to stop. And then we'll have money for the library, we'll have money for the museum, we'll have money for the Putnam Humane Society, we'll have money for charities, we'll have money for other things, recreation programs, and so forth.
Manna from heaven, everyone. You know, I just really think it's important that I have to go back to this. I hear an unidentified Wall Street attorney who's saying that, this wasn't really a confidential report. I don't know if Councilmember Yee shared with that unidentified Wall Street attorney the letter that we had received from the Chief Examiner Officer of the State Comptroller, which said, because these findings are still subject to change, we ask that to the maximum extent permitted by law, the information contained in this document be kept confidential until we formally, we, meaning the Comptroller's Office, release the report of examination from our central office. What that says is that they are going to release the final report, but instead, this report was not only salient portions that the supervisor thought was necessary to be read, were read out in public, and in addition, to the best of my knowledge, complete draft reports, that confidential report, I think it says that again, right? They were given to certain news media. Some, I believe the Putnam Courier had it. I think that the Examiner had it. So actual confidential reports were handed out. So I don't know if that Wall Street attorney read that, but I think if, did anyone here, do you need to have a Wall Street attorney interpret what I just said? No. And it says, we formally, F-O-R-M-A-L-L-Y, released the report of examination. The State Comptroller's Office said they are releasing it, not us. This town was not allowed to do that. So I don't know what Wall Street attorney is talking about, but I wouldn't even pay him $125 an hour if that was his opinion when he read that line. In addition, let's make sure that we understand all of these millions of dollars that you hear about engineers. Once again, we read this. Ron Hund, who was our accountant, about $46,000 only is paid to Nate Jacobson. All of those other millions of dollars of fees are paid by inspection fees. Mr. O'Rourke was here. He deals a lot with this. What happens is, as a developer, you come before our towns and you pay the development fees. You pay the engineering fees. I see somebody else out there, Jim Nixon, who deals with town boards and planning boards and all the other boards. I have clients when I deal with planning boards, zoning boards, not in the town of Southeast, everyone. I was accused of that too, but that's another day. But the bottom line is, we had the planning boards and the zoning boards. When I do that, I have really angry clients who say, why am I paying all of this money? Why am I paying this money? Well, guess what? It's because the town doesn't want to pay for your development. And that's what we do here. So I believe it was like $46,000. Now, as far as appropriating $25,000 to eliminate the assessor in the proposed budget, I don't see anything there. I see nothing. So I don't know where that $25,000 is located, but I do see that the town clerk has less money. There are no town assessors. The attorney stayed the same at $109,497. By the way, you know what the contractual expense for the engineer was? Budget this year is amended 2010, only $49,800. Next, the proposal is $34,860. Where is that millions of dollars for the engineer? I don't know where that is, because it's false.
Well,
it's wrong. No. It's the way that people say things like, we feel it's okay to release a confidential report. Same thing. No smoke and mirrors here, people. The bottom line is, it's wrong, okay?
May I have the
no
floor for a
smoke
minute?
and mirrors.
May I have the floor?
Yeah, sure, but I would like to, yes, go ahead, Councilman.
Obviously, we can see that we can see there are ideological differences in how people spend money, and thus the reason why we have such healthy debate on this town board. However, I try not to make these items personal, because basically it's personal because it's not our money we're spending. It's the community's money. Okay? As far as the confidential report, again, I could read from you here. It would seem to me that any right to confidentiality regarding the audit of the town's fiscal activities by the state controller would belong to the town, the subject of the report, and not the controller, the agency that performed the audit. Therefore, if the town supervisor, in his discretion, decides to discuss the report, even without a request, or to publish portions of the report due to the serious nature, the supervisor should be allowed to do so. This is true particularly because the purpose of the audit is stated to be identifying opportunities for improving operations and the town of Southeast governments, and identify strategies to reduce costs and strengthen controls to safeguard local government assets. The cover note specifies that the audit's results and recommendations are resources for local government officials to use in effectively managing operations. Obviously, in order to use the recommendations and the findings, it must be published and discuss. So if you want to hide behind this report, or you want to wait a few months down the road to finally discuss some of the deficiencies, that's the ideological differences that we are having. But I am concerned about your money, that if $18,000 gets signed and goes out the door, despite what the controller's report said, then I think that is fiscally wrong. And recommendation number 8 on the audit's report said, the board should enter into written service agreements or pass resolutions for all current and future professional services that clearly stipulate the services to be performed and the compensation for those services. Once again, I have to repeat, these are RFPs that need to go out yearly. We need to know what the market prices are for your money and how we spend it, and it hasn't been done, according to Mr. Gross, for 30 years, okay? And you can compare this town with other towns that spend X amount of dollars for computer services. Those other towns surrounding us have police departments, full-fledged police departments that require 24 hours a day computer services. They also require different levels of legal services. That's why their costs are a lot different than our costs. But once again, I can quote from this controller's report, draft, confidential, however you want to say it. It's your money that I'm quoting from that the controller is telling us, as guardians of the money, how we spend it.
That's right. There's been the gravy train has steamed in the dark for 20 years, and now there's an assertion that it should continue, by Councilwoman Hudak, it should continue to steam in the dark, notwithstanding a comptroller's report that documented $1.8 million in anti-competitive awards for public contracts. Now, Councilwoman Hudak asserts there's $46,000, and the comptroller asserts there's $1.8 million. I believe the comptroller is right. Again, we can take a look at how it arises. Nathan Jacobson paid for in taxes, paid for Putnam County EOH funds. Those are funds that come to us for reimbursement from the county. Escrow from developers, inspection fees, recreation, subdivision fees. Chazen Engineering, special districts, $226,999.86. Special districts charges. Those are tax dollars, folks. For families who live in these special districts. And the folks who live there pay. We all pay. Some of these districts are town-wide. Sterling Environmental, landfill closure, $153,719.86.
And that was hired off an RFP, Michael.
Years ago, that's right. As the comptroller noted, there were 8 out of 11 that were subject to placement without competitive process. That means there were 3 or 4 that received competitive process. You know, that's not a fig leaf for spending $1.8 million on an anti-competitive or questionable basis. Malcolm Perney, special districts, $39,322.54. Severn Trent, special districts, $436,783.44. Total engineering costs, $1,012,716.94. Plus the town planner, AKRF. Pending planning projects, $47,990.75. Approved planning projects, $17,158.55. Town planner and architectural, $52,959.72. Peach Lake sewer, $87,180.78. Total planning costs, $205,289.80. And as Councilman Cullen correctly noted, one of those vendors who are receiving in excess of, in this instance, just on these instances alone, in excess of $1.2 million, one was subject to competitive process, and it was one of the cheaper ones. So we see the gravy train at full throttle, folks, and the gravy train's got to be stopped. We have to comply with the mandate of the New York State Comptroller, and I'm demanding it. Councilman Yee and others are demanding it. And folks in the town are demanding it. We have to subject these millions to public competitive process. And then we'll have money on the back end. When we save money on the front end, we didn't save money January 21, 2010, 3-2, no competitive bidding. If we save money on the front end, we would have money now to spend on charities, recreation programs,